PlayStation just revealed the final look at The Last of Us Part 2 before its release on June 19th. What did they discuss? Let's break it down. Yep, we got our final look at The Last of Us Part 2. Hopefully, I think. I mean, the game comes out in like 3 weeks, June 19th, and we had our state of play that lasted roughly 25 minutes, a little bit less. A bunch of new information, but a lot of us are still left in the dark of what's actually going to be happening in this game. Hype level is still going up, though. I mean, I'm really excited. A lot of people are still super excited and have a lot of questions about what The Last of Us Part 2 is going to entail. And PlayStation delivered with a few hints at what we could be seeing in this new game. And we're going to break it down for you guys right now on this Geeks Love Reacts. So this state of play started with the same story trailer that we got a couple weeks ago when they announced that the game would be coming out June 19th. So nothing new here, but then we got Neil Druckmann, the vice president of Naughty Dog and the director of the game, coming on to give us like a whole breakdown of new gameplay elements. He gave us a little bit of backstory as to where this is taking place, how long after The Last of Us Part 1, I guess we call it Part 1 now, not just I don't know. So, according to Neil Druckmann, The Last of Us Part 2 takes place several years after the events of the first game, and we find Joel and Ellie winding down in Jackson, Wyoming. They showed some footage of Jackson, Wyoming a couple years ago, actually. This was PlayStation's final E3 press conference. You know that weird conference when they took the crowd and brought them to different theaters and did only had 4 games, and the mess that E3 conference was. So this was kind of familiar. You know, the town seems to be thriving a little bit. They're in that barn, it looks like, that dance hall. Everyone's having a good time. They're partying. Nothing's really going wrong. Ellie's riding a horse. They're going out and finding food and gathering things, and life seems pretty good in Jackson, Wyoming. But then we find out that things aren't so good in Jackson, Wyoming. Neil didn't go into too much detail about what happens. Obviously, I'm sure it's a huge spoiler, but something happens and Ellie is now out on her own, riding her horse through the forest. We also find out that this journey that Ellie's going on is going to be taking place in cities and regions that we haven't seen in the previous Last of Us game. And much like the first game, we're going to be seeing different seasons in this game. And though part of the game will be taking place in Jackson, Wyoming, Neil said that most of the story is going to be unfolding in Seattle. We're going to be going through the suburbs, the city, in the water, riding all around. I think they liked how diverse the city was in terms of different regions and how different each part of the city of Seattle look. I think that's going to be pretty cool, exploring what a post-apocalyptic Seattle and Pacific Northwest looks like. And it looks like we're getting some gameplay mechanics that were introduced in Uncharted 4 that's being brought over to The Last of Us Part 2. Mainly, I noticed that we're going to be swinging on a rope, and it looks like they kind of took Nate's grapple mechanic and threw that into The Last of Us Part 2. So, kind of cool. Ellie's also seen going in tall grass. That whole hiding in tall grass mechanic was introduced in Uncharted 4. Only this time they did say that enemies will find you if they're close to you when you're in the tall grass. In Uncharted 4, Nate could just be crouched in tall grass and an enemy will be right next to him and they won't see him because it's tall grass. Why would you see him? But Ellie will be laying flat down in the grass if some enemies right near her, and they will see her in the grass. So more realistic grass. So we also find out in the wake of the pandemic, and that's kind of weird to say, in the pandemic in the game and the quarantine in the game, Seattle's kind of turned into a war zone, and 2 different factions have emerged. The first faction being the Washington Liberation Front, otherwise known as the WLF. Now, these guys basically did not like how the military was taking over Seattle, and they kind of just wanted... They basically turned into a militia. So they raided the military, took all their weapons, took over the city, and if you get caught by these guys, they will get you good. So not only do you have to deal with the humans of the WLF, they also have guard dogs, and these guard dogs will get you. So Ellie pretty much emits a scent as she's traversing the land guarded by the WLF, and the dogs will actually pick up that scent. And I basically how it's shown was in the first game, you could kind of listen closely and the world turns into black and white and you see like the silhouettes of enemies around you or maybe behind like a bookshelf or something like that. It kind of seems like the same concept here, except when you go into black and white you can actually see your scent trail, and the dogs will pick that up and get you. There is dog violence in this game, so be warned that the dogs will get killed. So on the other side of this faction war, we have religious zealots known as the Seraphites or Scars. Now Neil points out that this faction is recognizable by the scar that's on the side of their face. Now unlike the WLF, these guys are a little bit more sneaky and stealthy. They use the overgrown elements to hide, and instead of using military grade weapons to kill you, they use bow and arrows to just be more of silent killers. And of course, what would The Last of Us be without the infected? Yes, clickers are back, stalkers are back, bloaters are back, and some crazy new infected thing that they would not say what it was until the game is released, but it does sound terrifying. Though we did get a little teaser of one of the new infected, and they're called the Shamblers, and these guys are similar to the bloaters, these giant infected fat things, but they're covered in like pus, and when you shoot it, it emits the pus, and everything around you burns, and the people will burn, and it's very disgusting and very horrid. It's like a spore cloud that goes off and you die. So all in all, we're seeing very similar gameplay mechanics that were brought over from The Last of Us Part 1, where Ellie will, take an enemy and use it as a defense shield, throwing bricks to distract enemies, lure them into a specific zone to attack them, or, get away from them so they don't notice you. A lot of the UI is very similar from the first game. And one cool thing they brought over from The Last of Us Left Behind DLC that was part of the first game was how you can kind of pit the infected versus, human enemies against each other. So if you throw a brick in between the infected and armed enemies, they'll notice it and they'll start fighting each other instead of fighting you, and you could just kind of scoot your way around them. So that's a pretty neat trick too. So just like the first game, we're going to be crafting weapons and getting items to further enhance our backpack that we have. I saw Ellie carrying around a wooden plank like the first game, a baseball bat, all the guns you can collect, and adding certain elements to those guns, like adding a scope to your gun. But it's the same deal of finding cloths on desks or in drawers and finding alcohol to create like a Molotov cocktail. The one big thing I loved about The Last of Us was the crafting and be able to, kind of strategize how you're going to attack a certain set of enemies. And that pretty much wrapped up Neil's section of the state of play. Gave us, a few quick updates, got us more prepared for the game launching on June 19th. And then the state of play closed out with a roughly 10-minute long gameplay session of The Last of Us Part 2. And yes, Ellie can swim now. She did it. Not only can she swim, she's going under the water. She learned how to swim, guys. And without a doubt, I don't care what kind of combat was involved in this gameplay demo. I don't care, what Ellie swimming, that's a huge thing in itself. I don't care about the dogs sniffing you out, hiding in the grass, throwing bricks, stabbing people. No, the one thing I cared about most was the girl playing a PlayStation Vita. A PlayStation Vita! Talk about a callback. Talk about Sony acknowledging something that failed tremendously here in America, at least. No, but seriously, this gameplay demo was packed with a lot of familiar elements that we're used to seeing from the first Last of Us game. Even the UI, as I mentioned before, is very, very similar. And it's good. I like this approach. But one cool thing, going back to the whole customization thing, is to create a suppressor, Ellie took like a plastic, it looks like a Coca-Cola bottle, and shoved it in the gun, and that created like a makeshift suppressor silencer, which is, I mean, that's pretty cool. And one other thing, Ellie does not hold back when it comes to killing people. She takes like a spiked plank and just whacks a guy like she's playing baseball. I mean, I'm all for that, but my God. All in all, this state of play did not show too much of what we can expect from The Last of Us Part 2. They said they only scratched the surface, and this was a nearly 25-minute state of play. If you're not hyped, you should be hyped. This game is going to be amazing. And I've never been so scared going into a game before, not because it has like horror elements. I'm nervous for what is going to happen story-wise in the game. I had this uneasy feeling about it, and that excites me. It makes me nervous. It's given me a whole slew of emotions, and the game is still 3 weeks out, and I'm not playing it anytime soon. But I want to hear it from you. What are you most excited about for The Last of Us Part 2? Are you excited for The Last of Us Part 2? Let us know in the comments. Be sure to like this video, subscribe to Geeks Love for more video game, pop culture, movies, television videos. We're going to do it all here. We're going to try to do it all for you guys. And yeah, so thanks for watching this video, guys. We'll see you guys in the next one. Take care.